G'day. Today we're going to remove the carburetor from this quad.
So I have the camera rolling on a tripod there, and I'm going to start removing this carburetor as best I can. Now it's interesting that cord there, which is from the reversing switch, jumps up over this intake connection there. I'd undone this one in the previous video, and it had actually slid off the back of the carburetor there, so let's put that one aside. This here is the fuel line. It's got a little pinch together clip on it, which you can generally pinch with your fingers. I'll use a pair of long nose pliers. Having a little bit of difficulty there with it. It's I've got the clip up higher. Now I'm going to lift that off there it is. So that's the clip I was trying to operate there, and I'm not expecting a lot of fuel to run out of that because it hasn't been run for so long, so it's not dripping. I think I'll just hang this up somewhere here, double it back on itself under there. But I haven't got a fuel problem, so there we go. Fuel line's out of the way. This is just recapping. That's the clip that I've slid back on the fuel line, and once that's slid back, the fuel line will pull off there, and I can't do it one-handed. So, but the main thing is to just squeeze this clip together to pull that off. This is just a vent pipe. It's the one that comes up, I see, to that T-piece up the top there. So it's on the inlet side of the carburetor, so it sucks and sucks a little bit through. This is the connection to the neutral switch. I'm thinking that probably can stay in place. Just keep in mind it swoops up over the top, similar to the reversing switch wire. So this is the throttle.
And the choke cable is there below.
This line here is a vacuum line for the petcock, I believe. I think that's different to what I'm used to on my bike. Now I'm going to release the front hose clamp on the front of the carburetor, connecting to the flexible pipe, which I'd call the inlet manifold. I'll give that whole carby a wiggle. It's basically gets connected by flexible pipes at this point, and so the carby's coming up to there. Now there's yet another breather pipe. I don't know where that one runs to. Look, I'm following it. Now this one goes all the way to the back of the fuel pump. So that's being on the output side of the carburetor. That's a vacuum pulse line, and it pulls off, and noting that it comes across the top of the snorkel here to plug on there. So we'll put that to the side. This other vacuum line coming into the top of the carburetor around this side is the line going to the petcock, which I believe stops the fuel running if the motor's not running. So it's out of the way. So now we're connected by a throttle cable and a choke cable. I'm going to start on the throttle cable. 4 screws in the side here. They're coming out easily. I don't know what my hands are doing in terms of blocking the vision. I'm hoping the vision's still running at this point. We'll see how it goes. So that's the 4th and final screw out. That's a little plastic cover you see on there. Mikuni. It's a Mikuni carburetor, original carburetor. So the throttle cable comes in via the top here. You can see I'm lifting that out, and that's the butterfly spindle here rotating when I pull on that. To remove it, to remove the cable, you've got to move this body around and get this brass piece in here to let me have another go at it. I don't know how much you can see, but I'm interested in getting this apart. I'm grabbing hold of the throttle cable there, moving it around, and it's just flicked out. And I don't know how much of that you saw, but that's a little brass fitting there on the end of the throttle cable. You probably need a close-up, but I can't do that. That's the end of the throttle cable, a little lead swaged end on there. This is a little brass fitting that the end of the cable comes through, and it's now released. I'll put that in my bucket. So that's the cable. It can now pass back through here. Note there's an O-ring on the cable just at the top there. So I'm going to take that off because I figure I'll lose it, and drop that in the bucket. And then so that's the throttle cable released. This is just a close-up of what I was trying to explain. That cover comes off with 4 screws, and then the end of the throttle cable has this brass fitting which is hooked onto the end of that's the end of the throttle cable there. It slots back in there. Now this brass button fits down into this hole, but the only way of getting it in there is to roll this around and bring the cable out so that there's enough slack for it to basically turn at right angles to come out through that little slot next to that hole for the cable to come out. I think that's the best I can show you. Now we've just got the choke cable, and it presents a bit of problems for a lot of people because there's a 12mm plastic fitting in the side of the carburetor that very difficult to get a spanner on. This here, I've just released it with these long nose pliers. It's now loosened up, and I'm winding that out. It's threaded into the side of the throttle body. It's as I said, takes a 12mm spanner. I've tried to grind the side of an open-ended ring spanner down to work this plastic fitting. In the past, it's even difficult to get your fingers in there, so I'm going to continue to work it. Oh well, there are. It's free now. So as I pull that out, you'll see the choke body comes out with it, and that's what the choke looks like. The carburetor is now free. I'm going to put that down and show you the end of this cable. There's a spring. The end of the throttle cable's in here. You can release some of the pressure on the spring there and just slide that out the side. So that's the brass fitting that is the choke mechanism, and I'm going to drop that in the box, and I'm going to take the spring off, and that's the plastic piece. There might be an O-ring in there. It looks like it's all together at the moment. I'm going to leave that, drop that in the box. And then you've got this right angle piece on the end of the throttle cable. It can stay there. So that's your choke. This is choke, I said throttle. The choke cable is now free. The carburetor is free. So a bit more detail on the choke cable. This black fitting is the 12mm nut fitting that screws into the side of the carburetor there. I used long nose pliers to unscrew that. And once you've unscrewed it, the choke comes out like this, and that brass fitting on the end is just hooked over the cable like that. The cable can just come out sideways from that, and then the spring is on there. I'm going to drop bits if I keep going. They are the choke and the spring. I'll drop those in the bucket. This is the 12mm nut fitting that screws in there. That can just come off. And save that. So the choke cable, right angle end on it, is doesn't look that different to the throttle cable, but if you move the levers, you'll see which one moves so that you don't get those wrong. And we'll finish there for now.
There's more to come with maintenance and repair on this bike, so get out to your shed and have some fun yourself.